Hi, my name is Gentry Perry. I have known Janine for quite a long time, but let me tell you a little bit about myself. I have a bachelor's in communication and a master's in education. I work, though, now as a marketing specialist, and I have worked in marketing for years. But outside of the realm of professionality, I am an avid internet user. I'm an avid tech enthusiast. I really love all of the new tools that are coming out. I'm an avid AI learner. I built my own computer. All these kinds of things have come together to create this unique, I would say, I don't know, to call it a well of information might be building myself up too much, but a puddle of information that I'm working on. And one thing that's really struck my heart in the past few years is internet safety. And, for a long time, I haven't really known how to channel that energy, and I'm still learning more on how I can help contribute to the conversation. But I'm seeing that there's a really big gap between knowledge between many parents and many kids. And so working in the educational space that I did, I think that gave me a little bit of insight into the kinds of spaces that kids are finding themselves in and the kinds of isolation that really they're facing because they don't have a lot of support from the home front. Sometimes because of bad parental situations or neglect or things like that, but other times just because there's a real barrier in knowledge and daily functioning. Kids' worlds currently are revolving around technology, and many parents' worlds are not. And so I love to help educate people. I'm never here to fearmonger and to make parents afraid and nervous and feel like they have to, be, biting their nails about their child's safety all the time. But it's definitely something I want to help parents and kids have a working understanding of in order to stay safe. And whether that is like explicit safety in obviously not, sharing pictures or videos or meeting with people online who you shouldn't be, but also more of the soft safety things like what kind of details should you share about yourself online and what should and shouldn't you be comfortable with, even if there isn't an explicit threat level, if that makes sense.
So what gave you this passion, this desire to really want to raise this awareness with parents? Like, did you run into some situations? Are you pulling maybe from your experience as a youth? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So as a young person, and truthfully, if my parents watch this, I'm sorry. I don't know if I've ever talked about this explicitly with them, but I had kind of some secretive interactions online that I shouldn't have been having. Thankfully, nothing came of it. I never met a stranger. But I had conversations with a lot of people who I'm certain they really weren't who they said they were. And as I've grown and just technology has evolved so rapidly in the past few years, it's incredible. It's so incredible and so nerve-wracking at the same time. I feel both things. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. But I see myself and I'm like, I'm an average person and I can manipulate my voice. I can change my voice with a program I downloaded online for free and got it up and running in 5 minutes. That to me is really a scary thing. So as you can hear, this is my voice normally.
And then with the click of a button, I can change my voice into this. And so you can see how it wouldn't be that hard for an adult to get their hands on some free software, get over a voice chat, and if anybody goes, why does your voice sound weird? You just go, oh, sorry, my internet's really bad, it's laggy. Sorry about that. Anyways, do you play Minecraft?
I can manipulate my internet address. I can manipulate, I'm thinking if I were the villain, if I were a bad actor, what damage could I do? And I fear, I'm like, wow, it really isn't that hard today. You can get tools for free. I think my stance on it is it's just like in real life, there are places you never want your kids to go. There are places that you never want your kids to go without you. And then there are places that you can let your kids go by themselves, but they have to know how to handle being there on their own.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to push a kid out into those scenarios without the proper understanding and preparation. And in some cases, you don't want to put your kid in that scenario at all.
Yeah.
You know?
That's a good way of looking at it. And I think sometimes it's hard because kids are still kids and they don't think like adults. So even though they may be prepared and know the right thing to do,
right,
they're still tempted to, you know, follow the crowd or do something that sounds tempting or whatever, and not really think long term that this could
absolutely,
you know.
Yeah, I think it's like, you know, it's like going outside. Like when we grew up, we all learned stranger danger. We learned, you know, like we learned all those tools, which again, the idea was the parents are hopefully going to be watching you while you're at the playground.
Yeah.
But just in case something happens, or you're in that age where you're starting to get a little bit more independent, you have to be able to have the tools, you know. And so I think it's a conversation every family should decide for themselves. Maturity levels are all over the place, you know, like one kid might be able to handle it better than others. But yeah, I mean, with how easy it is to trick somebody online, even a smart, wise, cunning 12, 13, 14, 16-year-old could really get into some big trouble.
Yeah, I agree.
And when I started realizing, like, what if I was the bad actor? What could I do? And then thinking, okay, there are bad actors out there. And there's a lot of parents who aren't aware of what I'm aware of. I'm like, there has to be some information to fill that gap.
Well, I'm so glad you took it upon yourself to try to fill that gap, because I completely agree that, you know, the more you learn, and especially the more you learn about the dark side, if you will, the people that are doing things intentionally to harm, the more it's like, man, I just feel like I lived in this little bubble and I didn't realize it. And you know, there's other people that are living in that bubble. And even as you mentioned, you know, doing things that your parents didn't know that you were doing, I think that's just that typical adolescent development that we're tempted. You know, I often say I grew up in a time where there was phones on the wall on a cord,
Yep.
You know, and it was long distance and I couldn't call my friends for very long, and parents could hear everything I was saying. And it's like, what would I have done? Even though I considered myself to be a pretty good kid. I mean, I tried to make good decisions, but what would I have done had I had the internet at my fingertips, that I could have sent a text or sent images, or, you know, it would have been tempting because you're a young person. And again, you're not thinking like an adult. And, you know, that's why we need adults to help young people in that realm to keep them safe, you know?
Even before, I think, that stage of rebellious adolescence, there's a curiosity. I remember being around 11 years old or 12 years old or something in that area. And it was Christmas vacation, you know, which that fills my heart with so much joy thinking about. But I would get on AOL chat rooms and I would just talk with people. And I'm certain my parents didn't know about this. They would not want that to happen. They might have not even known I had that access, you know, but I did. And I would just talk with random people, and I would make up lies about myself, not again for any nefarious purposes, but just because I had maybe a little bit of wits about me and it was fun to pretend to be somebody else. Cause I'm like, well, who could check, you know? Yeah. So even then kids get curious and they check, they kind of test their boundaries in every way, even if they're good kids, even if they don't want to do anything bad, they always are stretching and testing their boundaries to see what can they do once they start getting that autonomy.
And I think that's just as I teach, you know, mental health first aid trainings, and we talk about childhood development. It's normal childhood development to kind of test your boundaries a little bit and kind of think, okay, these might be my parents' values, but what are my values? Maybe I don't think this is a big deal. Maybe I do want to try this out, you know? So again, that's typical childhood development. And I think that's where I have a fear as well, at just how easily accessible so much is at their fingertips. You know, I look at cell phones as like a loaded weapon, truly. And I think a lot of people don't have that seriousness about it. But when you think about even the pornographic images that are at their fingertips and things that pop up that they might not even be searching on their own, again, it's natural developmental curiosity to want to know, but that can cause so much damage for them lifelong.
Right. And I talk a little bit about that. So I actually put out a supplement called Internet Safety Town. I don't know if that will be the name of this kind of supplement forever going forward, but it just kind of, I think it evokes something in all of us who grew up. Like, yep, I remember Safety Town. You know, it taught us stop signs, it taught us crossing the street, it taught us these basic things of how to exist in our neighborhood spaces safely. And I was thinking it's kind of the same principle, and I'm sure that's trademarked or something. So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I should be careful about that. But I talk about several things that parents should be on the lookout for. And it's not just predators who are looking to gain access to children, though that's certainly a really big part of it and a big fear. There's information gathering that predators will do. There's scams and credit card stuff. I mean, lots of predators are, like, kids are easy to take advantage of. Kids have access to their parents' cards. They can scam a family through a kid. And then also just at links, clicking links. There are a lot of people online who, they call themselves trolls or whatever. That was at least what they called them. I think there's still that name. I don't know if that's evolved at all. But those people will leave really bad, nefarious links to gore, to pornography, to things that shouldn't be seen, just because some people just think of it as kind of a prank maybe or something, or they like the thrill of, I don't know, kind of damaging somebody out there online. And that's its own kind of evil, but certainly not the same kind of sexual predator evil. It's a different type. And I think that that's important that we look at.
I agree. And, I had my husband do a video with me. I don't know if you watched it, where he was talking about online safety as well as an esports coach and as the director of technology for a school system, and just the things that he has heard parents in the district talking about. So, things like, I didn't realize my child was spending all this money on gaming until I got my credit card statement, because they already had it in the device set up. And there's a lot of gambling opportunities set up in these games for kids.
Yeah.
So it's easy for them to click and spend their parents' money, and the parent has no idea until they happen to check their credit card statement. And some don't, because if it's not a huge amount, they may not even notice it. But again, money aside, it's setting those kids up to kind of develop that gambling, the false beliefs within gambling that this will be the next big win, or maybe they do win big and they think this is kind of a cool, fun way to make money. And, again, all of those things that could harm them later in life, that a lot of times I think parents are just, I don't know. I think, again, I speak softly on this because I'm not a parent, but, a lot of times it's that peace and quiet time that they desire. So let them go ahead and play their game. It's really not that bad. Other kids are doing it too. Maybe not even realizing what's in the game as far as language, as far as, violence and different images they're seeing. I think sometimes if our plate is so full as adults, sometimes we just pick our battles, if you will. And that seems like maybe a battle that's not that big of a deal because everybody else is a part of it. But I do think it's something that really needs to be spoken more about.
Absolutely. And I think I am a gamer, I avid. Certainly. I play board games. I play video games. I think that there's a time and a place. I think that it's something that it's not just in need of regulation, but it's in need of a deep conversation. Because I feel like society tends to swing really hard on either side. Either it's like, no, you don't need to play any games, you don't waste your life, don't do any of this, like parents, because that's something that they never experienced or never had. So then they tend to be like, no, the abstinence is the only measure for that. And that creates sneaky kids, tends to. And then the other side is just no regulation, whatever, do what you want. I mean, I remember growing up, my friend had access to everything. We played Grand Theft Auto at his house. Again, mom and dad, sorry if you're listening to this. But I mean, it was like his mom didn't care at all. It was like, oh yeah, whatever, you're in the house, so how bad can it be? And I mean, it was bad. There's no doubt about it. And so with my activities, I'll just kind of go through kind of the different things that I talk about, because those are the things that immediately I guess I have a little bit to say on. And then maybe if we get into something else, feel free to ask. But the first activity that I have is about sharing personal information. And so I think it's really easy for kids to kind of, and I say kids, I guess I mean they're online, right? So that can be from 5 to 20. But especially with younger kids, I think it's easy for information to be slowly kind of leached from them, right? I think most kids know that if an adult comes to you and says, hey, what's your birthday? What's your name? What school do you go to? And when do you get on the bus? Like, I think most kids, hopefully, a red flag would go up at that point. But it can be a lot more tricky than that. You know, it can be simply over text conversations, right? A lot of people are like, oh, I don't have a headset, so I can't talk, which is another layer of obfuscation. That could be anybody on the other side. You're not even hearing anybody. And then on top of that, it's like, oh, I went over to the park yesterday with my family. We live over here. Do you guys go to any parks where you're at? Or something like that. It's like, and it's just, and slowly you can build a profile about somebody just over the course of a couple gaming sessions or a couple conversations.
I agree. I think, again, I went to a couple trainings with law enforcement, and they talk about that with images that are shared online. You can have your school shirt online, or, you know, tag that you went somewhere. I mean, it can be very easy to get enough information to be able to Google somebody or look somebody up and figure out where they live or whatever it may be. And I think it's just, you know, young people are easy to manipulate because they're more trusting. I mean, that's just, and they show more, I think, than they realize that they show, as far as sometimes you can really pick up on those that are wounded. They want some, you know, more attention. They're seeking that approval. So it's easy for people to kind of go, okay, this could be an easy target for me to pick up this person.
Yeah, I think that there are people who play video games online because that's just a hobby that they enjoy, but there's other people and many kids who play video games online because that's the place where they find refuge, right? Maybe they don't have a lot of friends in real life, and maybe that's the way that they unwind. Maybe they have a bad home situation, or they suffer in their academics, and that stress piles on, and then this becomes a coping mechanism. Well, now a byproduct of this coping mechanism can be you are meeting and sharing information with people that you otherwise wouldn't, because you have more of a right mind about you. And I think that it's interesting that the number one desire of all of these internet avenues, whether that's social media, whether that's video games, I would say it's pretty much to collect information. That's what they're trying to do, because they see it. We are the product in many ways, especially these free to play games. There are many games that you can download for free, you can play for free, and it maintains its freeness until you pay money, until you want to go one step further or do one extra thing or whatever. But the other way that those models subsidize is they collect your information. So that can be, you know, the place that you live, your demographics, your age, all these different things. And while most of that information is not available to bad actors, there are data leaks all the time. This is something that is very common, unfortunately. You'll see it in the news constantly. And I don't think people understand really what it means. Or it's like, oh, a big company had another data leak. And they're like, okay, well, I didn't put my social security number in there, so I guess I'm fine. But there's a lot of information that's floating out there.
As you mentioned, like, being a gamer yourself, did you ever feel like you felt like you had a hard time managing the amount of time you gamed, or, you know, ever felt like you had to kind of put some regulations in place yourself for that?
I think for myself, at least, it was mostly a symptom. I would find I've certainly had times in my life where I was really just putting all my time, energy, and focus into gaming, more than I wanted to, more than I felt, good about. I felt shameful about the amount of time that I was putting into it. But for me, in many ways, I think every time it's cropped up as a problem, it's because there's something else happening. And so I can curb that, but typically it's like, I'm stressed in this other field of my life, or I'm tired, I'm not sleeping well, and that's really affecting my cognitive skills and my ability to maintain and regulate. And so I think I had a big problem before, and I'm just speaking very open and honestly with you. I hope you don't mind. I think I had a problem with shame in video games for a long time. Because my family, nobody else plays video games like I do, and so I very much made me feel like I'm an outsider and like I should feel bad about this. My family's not really resting is not their strength. And so to put it in a certain way. And so when I played games, I felt very guilty because I'm like, well, I'm not productive. I'm not doing anything. And so I really had to find this in this better place, this more enlightened place for myself, where it's like, I don't feel this pressure to work all the time. I don't feel this pressure to produce all the time. I'm allowed to, just like I have friends who will watch TV for a few hours a night, and that's totally fine and acceptable. Like nobody thinks anything of it. I can play a game for a couple hours every night. Now, it becomes a problem when it's intrusive, right? Or when it's disruptive. It's like, okay, am I neglecting my wife? Am I neglecting my responsibilities? Am I neglecting my job? Thankfully, I think I've found a place now where that's not the case. But again, like I said previously, I think that it did crop up as a coping mechanism. And just like anything, it can become addictive. But I'm a little bit more of an advocate for games than I am against games, but I'm an advocate for healthiness all around.
I try to really be careful that I'm not trying to sound like I'm against gaming, because we always say it's like the having responsible gaming. Right. But in the when we talked about The More We Know, the high endorphin activities and some of the games that really release those high endorphins in your brain, that can become addictive is kind of, I feel like, a harsh word, but your brain can really get used to those high endorphins all the time, where when you have low endorphin activities, you don't really know what to do with yourself because you want that high endorphin rush again. So that's my concern.
I think that it's an okay thing to have a conversation about, and I think it's an okay thing to figure out where those lines are within your house, because everybody's house is going to be just a little bit different. But speaking of high endorphin activities, I love just playing the devil's advocate. I hope this doesn't get cut.
I'll leave myself.
My wife is really into running. She has been for a long time. And I totally support the activity, but I've always been more of a hobbyist and always kind of found ways to, I guess I'm okay if she's out doing something and I'm home or whatever. If we have that separate time, we're both somewhat independent. But I certainly know there have been times when she's been addicted to running, which I'm okay with. But I certainly know if she goes a day without running, she's got this pent up energy. She's not happy about it. And then if she goes a couple days without running, or whatever, if there's a reason that she can't run for like a week or something, it can really shift and dramatically move her mood, at least for a short time. And I think it's because that's also a high endorphins activity. And I think that there's a place for it, just like video games can become super addictive, and they're a sedentary activity, which I will admit is probably much worse for you than running in a lot of other health regards. I think that there's always that place where most of the things that we engage in our modern society are built to be very high endorphin activities, whether that's because we push everything, right? It's like running can be that high endorphin activity, video games can be that high endorphin activity, sports can be that high endorphin activity. Gambling, again, it's like I go the way of abstinence, but certainly even people who just gamble casually, that's something that they really look forward to and really would like to do a lot more given the opportunity. Or watching TV, or again, just social media is the big one, right? TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. They are systems that are built to keep our attention for as many hours as possible. And YouTube, I find to be the other more addictive thing in my life. However, I tend to game and watch YouTube at the same time. so, at least I'm putting them together. But that's something that I think that, I just saw this the other day. I think it's called attention economy, and there are attention economics, and there are people who research the attention economics, the economics of your attention. And it's really a better way of saying how how much can I keep your attention? How difficult is it to keep your attention? What methods can I use to keep your attention? And it all ties back to kind of our online world today and how we are built in a large advertising machine. As sad and maybe scary as that is sometimes, that is a lot of what it comes back to.
That's interesting, because I'm always interested when I hear, it seems like it changes every year or so. Like your attention span, the average attention span is 7 seconds. And then it's like, I think it's down to 3 seconds. Like, oh my goodness. But I do think, as a society, we're not really encouraged or take time to rest our minds, have quiet time, be outdoors, whatever it is, to just kind of have that time to shut down. It's almost like you said, I feel like it's more encouraged to stay busy, so
right.
Continue, but I don't know that that's healthy. I mean, it's to continually stay busy and not give yourself that time to mentally rest. So you hear the buzzword of like meditation, but that honestly is just giving yourself that permission to not get bombarded with thoughts and everything, and just kind of have that quiet time to kind of just
right.
kind of meditate a little, or meditate on meditation, but to kind of think on some things, a little deeper thought.
I think it's in many ways it's that busyness, and it's the hyper connectedness, and that really profound connection that we have today is unlike anything that we've had all throughout human history. There you have access to anyone that you can find online, that like at a moment's notice. And so I think that with that, it's interesting because it's also created this profound loneliness with people. Many young people feel like they are lonelier than they are before because there are a myriad of reasons, but I think that creates this really dangerous breeding ground for oversharing, connecting too much to people online, connecting too much to people who are willing to give that attention. I think because we all tend to be a little bit more screen focused, which again, I'm not anti-screen, I'm all for screen balance, but I will admit the balance has shifted in the wrong way. That's the current problem that we're facing. And I think that makes people really crave direct attention, right? Think about how many times somebody gives you their full attention. It's like typically there's some TV on, they're on their computer or their laptop or their iPad or their phone, and that attention is split. And so even when people are online, it's like, okay, somebody's choosing to talk to me. They're messaging me. They want to engage with me. That could really make a kid or a young person or even adults very susceptible to deceptions, to problems. I mean, I guess my heart is towards kids because I worry so much, but there are countless stories of men and women who fall prey to scammers, victimizers who want to control their lives because those men and women are lonely, and somebody's feeding them a lot of attention that they're not getting anywhere else. And that online space is a really easy place for that access to come in.
I agree. I think it's just kind of like you say, whatever age it may be, if you have that desire, that need in you that someone is able to fulfill, and a lot of times that need is that loneliness, that attention, that approval from people, as well as like the strange time that it is where young people know a lot more, as you mentioned, a lot more than adults in a lot of areas with this technology. Where in days prior, adults were always kind of the go-to of knowledge, teaching the young person. And I think we just have to be careful that young people, one, still know that there's value in the wisdom of adults. And two, that, adults can kind of humble themselves maybe enough too, to be able to learn from, not be that guru of knowledge that maybe they were used to having, but learn from the young people as well.
Well, that's actually the last part. I think it's the last activity in my little activity set that I created, and it's called The Power of Open Communication. And I think that's where we have to be today. I think in the past, it was very easy for parents to kind of be the arbiter of knowledge, of power. I know everything. I take care of this house. I make the money. Like we just have to respect the fact that I'm in charge of everything about you. And there was no room for negotiation. That obviously created a lot of unhealthy relationships, parents to childs, in years past. But I don't think we can afford that luxury anymore of just having an unhealthy relationship with parents. Now we're talking about, we really need to have open channels of communication, where information can be shared freely, where parent and child feel like they can go to each other with a little bit more vulnerability than maybe was before. I think that there's really high importance to keeping parents in an authoritative space, but I also think that there's really high importance for parents allowing kids to be the safe space, or yeah, parents making themselves that safe space for their kids. Because if they don't allow themselves to be that safe space, the kid is going to find that somewhere else, and we can't afford that. And so it's really hard, I think, to like have open channels of communication. I mean, even husband to wife, there are things that I don't really want to talk to my wife about, just because for one reason or another, it's like, I don't think she's interested. It's just easier to not do that, whatever, like we always want to go on the path of least resistance, right? Especially when there's disagreement or fear of judgment or whatever. But I think it's just like, we can't test the waters anymore. We can't really pretend like, oh yeah, like the parents just kind of are always in charge and up here, and the kids are always down here, and they're just going to listen to everything. There was more room for control 15 years ago. That control has been taken away in a lot of ways, and not explicitly. So there's a lot of outside influences coming from outside of the family, for good and for bad.
I agree. And I think too, like if we can kind of help young people, like when you mentioned feeling like shameful as a youth, I think there's so many, like shame is such a heavy thing, and I think that identity that a lot of youth struggle with, even in, what would be considered good home environments, it's still, again, I think it goes along with some of that typical adolescent development where, you're just not sure. You're trying to figure out, who am I? Do people really like me for me? Can I be who I am, or do I have to try to be somebody else? And I think a lot of that can really follow us into adulthood for many people.
Yeah, and I think in addition to that, I think parents need to really be intentional about evolving as their kids grow and age. And I think that that's something that I have to give my parents a lot of credit for. We don't see eye to eye on everything. I'm an adult, my parents are adults. We don't perfectly agree, but we have a really strong relationship. And the reason that is because a couple of years ago, I probably should have been a little bit sooner than a couple of years ago, but regardless, my parents kind of shifted from, okay, I'm your parent, I'm telling you what to do, to now I'm like your coach. My dad's mentioned that before, where it's like, I'm not here to tell you what to do, but if you come to me and you need help, I'm here to guide you through that situation as best I can. And I think that happens a few times at least, right? Where it's like, obviously you don't treat a 5-year-old like you treat a 1-year-old, but you do that more out of necessity of, how do I take care of this thing, this person, versus like intentionality about like, oh, I'm growing as an adult, so I'm no longer going to put a bottle in my 5-year-old's mouth. It's like, no, you just know, like there's some things that just happen where you're like, okay, that 5-year-old, they're going to do this, and then they get to 10, and then between like 10 and 15, maybe not a lot of physical stuff changes, right? You don't have to pick them up anymore to put them at places. You don't have to like, whatever. Maybe they have a friend or a friend's mom who's like picking them up and driving them someplace. So it's like, okay, you're losing some of that physical control, but parents will maintain that same level of like, okay, well, I should still be kind of informing all of your decisions as if you were 9 years old. And it's like, well, they're 14, so perhaps not, But I think that that's something, and it's kind of funny. And I think that many parents do have some instinct on that, but I think that that's something that has to be really intentionally developed. I haven't gone through that yet, but I've gone through it on the other side of it, where I have to say, I think my parents are doing all right. They're,
Well, and it's that live and learn, and they always say you don't get a handbook on parenting, and it's kind of true. I mean, like you say, you have that age of accountability that we talk about, 13, 14. But on the flip side, I would always try to tell, like when I was teaching with my students, to kind of give their parents that grace that, it hasn't been that long. I mean, when you think of a fourth grader as 10 years old, and I guess I compared it myself, having taught fourth grade and then seventh grade, it's like, man, it was not that many years, but you used to be all cute and giving hugs, and I was pretty cool in your eyes. And now all of a sudden I'm like your enemy. Like, what happened?
Yeah.
So I really try to help them see as young people how hard it is also on parents to try to adjust quickly to these changes, because it's not a lot of time in between. And especially I feel like nowadays kids seem like they're growing up a lot faster.
I just saw a picture of a kid that I taught in G-Force, which was our kids ministry years ago in our church. And he's like 20 now. And I'm like, I'm not that old. Like, maybe I am that old. I'm starting to come to that crisis where like 8 years ago for me, I was still out of high school. 8 years ago for him, he was, 12 years old. Like there's a lot of development that happens there. So that those larger chunks of time are we're less different from what we were to where we are now than those kids.
Yes.
An 8-year-old versus a 16-year-old or whatever. It's crazy. It really is just crazy.
It is, and I think it's compounding on top of, like you said, there's lots of different factors, but between blended families and broken homes, kids becoming like something that fills a need for that adult. So not wanting to let go of them because you're, so valuable to me, you make me feel like I have worth by you. So, but it's not really fair. Like I always cringe when someone says, "Oh, look, it's your mini me." And it's like, oh, that child has a whole separate identity, even though they may look like you, but I think you can get caught up in like, this is my mini me, and the pressure that puts on a young person.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, I am so thankful that you are going down this route and taking the lessons that you've learned and turning them into a positive, which I always say is a beautiful thing, because we all go through different things. We make mistakes. We've had things that we didn't have choices over that we've gone through, but I really believe that we can turn them all into something really strong and valuable by using them for good and teachable moments like that. So
thank you so much for allowing me to talk with you today. It's been really nice. I really just want to keep exploring and learning, and really I think just see how we can educate kids and families to just all together be more informed and be more connected, right? Because really that's what we want. The end goal is to see parents and kids connected to each other, communication barriers torn down, and families that are healthy and whole.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. We're on the same page.
Who can argue at that point that I just said? No one. Who doesn't want to see families healthy and whole?
So your resource then, I can stick in the description of this video that they could connect with. Is that the best way?
Yeah, it's so I have it on my website, and I'll give you a link to that. And essentially it's pay what you want. So, which means please take it for free. I'm not at all trying to make a lot of money off of this or anything like that. If you want to throw a couple of dollars my way, fine. I'm not going to say no. But at the same time, I would much rather people have resources that they can just take and share and email and whatever. I don't care.
Awesome.